Timmy, what's up?
Good.
Good to see you.
See you.
Yeah, I think I see you a lot on Instagram. Your stories are always entertaining, so it's sometimes we hang out in person, but
Sometimes not nearly enough, but
not nearly enough.
we will in a couple months, I think, in London. Be the
That's
first.
right.
It's
That's
funny.
right.
I have like different constituencies for my Instagram stories. Um, Sometimes I'll post something, about like 3D printing or something like that, and I'll have people. There's one friend I'm thinking of in particular who will say, "No more 3D printing. Get back to the cooking." And there are people who are there for the cooking stories, and people who like the quirky tech stuff. I'm complex. What can I say?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I just post whatever happens to be in front of me.
Exactly.
Might be a dog,
It
might be a meme.
might be a pretty flower. I mean, it's springtime in the Bay Area right now. We're still living in the Bay
Yeah.
Area, and there's all kinds of pretty flowers. So
Oh man,
yes, I do.
that's so cool. I guess for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
I would love to. So,
Excellent.
my name is Tim. I work for a company called Confluent. We do a lot of stuff with streaming data, Kafka, Flink. We're kind of bridging that world into Iceberg and data lake things recently. And I run the developer relations team there. So we want to make it easy and fun to succeed with, kind of the underlying technologies of the Confluent, the Confluence business. So things like
Mhm.
Kafka, stream processing,
Yeah.
governance, integration, jazz. We write sample applications. We have a robust meetup program. We create quirky, sometimes quirky, fun, always educational videos. Lots of conference appearances. So it's a decent sized team. I'm very proud of them.
That's cool. And as far as I know, you were one of the OGs of developer relations as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, let's go with that. I've I've been doing it since it was commonplace to call it DevRel.
Mhm.
So in my own sort of trajectory there, around 2009, 2010, I started speaking at meetups and conferences, and I was completely hooked. Was involved in the No Fluff Just Stuff conference, which
Oh, yeah.
uh, more of a Java software developer sort of world thing, but awesome. Really formed me as a speaker. My consulting practice at the time pivoted from custom coding to more training, and you see this kind of like educational advocacy kind of bent starting to emerge, and the roles I had over the next few years gradually started to look more and more like what we call developer relations these days, till about 2017 when that really solidified. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's what I love. It's what I do. It's kind of like the things I've done and the gifts I have, the things I'm good at. They all sort of come together in that that profession and
Mhm.
that set of
Were you
activity.
always public speaking or good at it, I should say?
Yeah, as Ferris Bueller would say, never had one lesson. And I'm serious. So when people sometimes have asked, how do you do this, and can you give a training? And so I have to stop and think. And this sounds like the most ridiculous, self-grandizing boast. I don't mean it that way at all. I don't. There's things that I've learned, and if you learn them, you kind of have a framework for how to teach them. Because okay, ballroom dancing, I have no talent.
Mm.
I have no talent at all. I can do some of it because I have been taught, and you could just grind it out a piece at a time and get to where, I don't. I look like not like a hardwood, maybe like a softer wood. Very wood. It doesn't look good still, but I can do the things, right? Because I've been taught a piece at a time. So that kind of a thing, I could imagine how to explain. But public speaking, I don't know. I really have to stop and think. Okay, what am
Mm.
I doing, and how would I explain that? Because it's intuitive.
Yeah.
And
But
I before doing it in tech, I'd done it in like an adult Sunday school context at church. So I'd had sort of a decade of experience kind of putting a, a outline and a curriculum together and being in front of a group of people and taking questions and that kind of stuff. But I never had a lesson.
Yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is. But it seems like public speaking isn't that part of the role of DevRel, is to go out and give talks.
I mean, that's the stuff you see. There's programmatic
Right.
stuff. That's not on stage. That's absolutely essential. Like what I call my community team. That's Ale Murray or Ale Gutierrez and her team. And they're not frequently in front of people, but they're essential. I've got a video team that they're not ever up on stage. They're key creative partners and production partners. And then, there's the developer advocates that you see, or we have a education team. We don't call them curriculum developers because they're like senior engineers who build curriculums. We have a name for them. But those folks, you see them on camera. So yeah, those people teaching or up on stage, it's the stuff you see that's really core to the mission.
Yeah.
But there's lots of stuff besides that you need.
Yeah, it's pretty hardcore. You got a film crew.
You got a film crew, dude. I got a video team just dedicated to DevRel. And
wow.
That's a lot of the magic. I mean, like a lot of the stuff we do looks so good because there's a guy, I call him a full stack filmmaker, Peter Fury, with pro gear and everything. And he's also a creative partner. He and I have worked together for 10, 12 years.
Well, that's cool.
Any of the fun stuff we do, we co-write.
Dang. What's that process like?
Well, we'll get a full idea, like make something up that's from real life. I want to do a mini mockumentary about a software architect who has really bad opinions. And so you just start with there. Okay, mockumentary, that's an easy enough format. And what do you want to do? Well, I worked for a company. This is actually, we did this in 2021 when I was at Confluent the first time. We wanted to just talk, kind of promote the cloud service. So you think, well, how would you do that? Well, here's an architect who only wants artisanal, handcrafted servers that, he polishes, cuts his own network cables, and just, what would be crazy extremes you could go to there. And you just kind of fill it in, write the jokes, and go from there. That's one example.
Yeah.
You kind of sketch it out and collaboratively with Peter. I mean, like I said, he's a writing partner. He's not technical. He's technical as a filmmaker, but he's not like a software or a data person. But he's been around long enough that he can actually, if he takes the first pass, he can do a pretty good job with a lot of the ideas. And I'll go through and like, okay, the way you'd make that joke sound more native is like this, or we should do that, or.
Interesting. How do you know like what kind of content's going to resonate with developers?
You don't always. I mean, you make content and you get hits and misses. Some stuff, runs away and develops a life of its own. Some stuff you think, man, this was genius, and kind of nobody cares. Like a year or so ago, when Peter and I were at Startree, we made it was kind of like a poor man's Radio Lab history of data. And we got, budget for music and sound design, and just went deep on a bunch of history. And I had fun because this is like Tim in dad mode history lecture. But we tried to keep it contained and interesting. Nobody really cared. It didn't really work the way we thought it would. And so, you don't know. And I think part of the key is, I say developers to refer to a lot of people, and I
right.
know, like this is probably rude, but I will absolutely include data engineers in that.
Sure.
Technical people who make stuff with computers, whatever it is you do. Architects, ops people, it's data engineering people, it's a lot of analytics people, whether you're, Python, Java, SQL, YAML files, whatever it is you do. We're all a lot more alike than we are different. We all have, there's kind of this like consensus sense of humor and set of inside jokes. So they vary
Right.
a little bit from community to community, but we're all the same kind of weird a little bit. So me being that, having that's since I was 10, this is what I wanted to do. I speak that language natively, and I can make jokes in that language natively, and they are going to tend to sound right. Whereas when you see copy from a marketing organization proper, and my team rolls up to the CMO at Confluent, but folks who are marketers who are more tasked with creating content that resonates with like the buyers of data infrastructure in our case.
Right.
When they try to write developer stuff, it's always like, you're awesome, you're doing good work. This has an accent. You sound like you're not from around here.
Mm.
You tweak it a little bit. So part of it just you got to grow up in the space. You got to be the thing.
You got to be the thing. Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually just talking to a friend of mine. Who's going to be doing a product launch shortly, and she's asking, "Have you seen any launches from small startups that have caught your attention?" I was like, I can't think of anything actually recently. So it's just,
Yeah,
I think there's a kind of a sea of sameness. That was my comment. I was like, I guess if you want to stand out, just look at a lot of the launches and maybe try to avoid some of the obvious things. So
yeah. And we're trying to, it's part of my mission in coming back to Confluent is, at least as our content that touches developers, we're trying to be a little more interesting, a little spicier, sometimes a little less safe.
mm-hmm.
When you're a big grown-up company, you've got a lot to lose, and you end up with getting in this mode where you think, well, the folks we're talking to are about serious business. It's not time for levity. It's and that I guess there are dull people in the world, right? But
Yeah,
just because they're decision makers who command budget in organizations that buy data infrastructure, that doesn't mean that they don't like fun.
right.
It's not what it means to be human. So I'm not about that.
That's good. That's good. How do you stand out in a really crowded market, like the data tooling market?
Yeah. Well, the stuff, the tools I bring are just the words I'm thinking of just sound so cliched. Let me just say the cliches, and then we'll unpack them. But
let's double click on that. Yeah,
let's double click empathy. And it's a cliche, I know, but empathy and quality. So let me, before this descends into some Harvard Business Review article, by empathy, what I mean is, in the world of software and data, things are always changing. You might get little periods of stasis, but something's always changing. We happen to be in the middle of what I think is a generational paradigm shift.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the last time anything like this happened was networked PCs in the 80s. I don't even think the internet was as big a change as this in terms of the way people actually build systems. That's scary, and you're just doing your job and you're trying to keep up, and you got responsibilities at home, and you don't have time to just study all the time like maybe you used to. And so all these changes happening, so much to learn. That's scary. So I really try to drive this in my team. We are there to help that global community of a few million people adapt to these changes that's going on and learn things that they need to learn. So that's what I mean by empathy. Scary, lots changing, hard to learn these things, big paradigm shifts. We're here to help. And we really want to do that in an excellent way. So when we put somebody on stage, I really want that to be somebody who is a world-class presence on stage. If you're going to be in a meetup or in a conference and you decide to spend 45, 60 minutes of your time listening to that person, I want it to be good. There's a lot of not good at technology conferences. And that's got to be excellent. And if you're going to watch a video, that's another huge part of what we do. It's going to look great. It's going to sound great. It's going to be edited well. It's going to be crisply paced. It's going to be interesting. Maybe there'll be something creative. Maybe it'll be goofy. It'll make you laugh a little bit, so you'll remember things better. That's how we try to do it. And there's so much more to it than that. But I think those are the differentiators.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially right now, I can imagine a scenario where Confluent and Kafka is sometimes your competition. I'm starting to realize this with writing, but your competition is actually the AI engines, the chat. So I think increasingly people are going there to get answers, and documentation and videos, maybe, but not. You're competing against AI itself. So
yeah, more and more. And I there's tutorial videos I watch on YouTube, and I've started to notice the voices sound real good. And I'm like, wait a sec, I have a good voice. What's going on here? And they sound real good, but every once in a while there'll be some little tell where a word will just be pronounced wrong, or it'll be a plural of an abbreviation that isn't pronounced correctly. It's like, oh, this is an AI doing this. And I actually had one video for tutorial for FreeCAD, open source CAD software. And the guy actually said, yeah, I'm using AI to do this because I want to do this in English. My accent's real heavy, and I just don't.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, AI tools are starting to creep in there, and they're only going to get better. So at some point, maybe the value of being able to sound good, that becomes less valuable. But I think being able to explain well, I think we're a ways off from AI doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the missing ingredient that's needed if you're going to talk about empathy, explaining things well and getting to the point in a very easy, understandable way. That's insanely difficult, actually.
It is. And there's kind of a magic there, because, you have to imagine what are some things that the person I'm talking to knows and understands. And what are those things which are like the thing that I want them to understand? Because like they know this stuff. I want them to know this stuff. They can't just jump and go from what they know to what I want them to know, or they'd already have done it. So what's some stuff that I can kind of get them to steps along the way? And you have to be able to imagine what those things are and create those analogies. And that's
well, yeah. I mean, you guys announced, what was it, Tableflow, I think it is, or
yes,
yeah. So
this recording.
Yeah. And so, like, how would you bridge the gap between where people are today with the vision of how you would like to see people using that product? I guess maybe I should ask, is that even a fair way of putting it? Like, how you would like to see people using the product? Or is that sort of just an organic thing that bubbles up, like how people end up using the product versus how maybe Confluent intends people to use the product?
Right. Well, I can absolutely guarantee you there are folks in the product organization and in product marketing that can answer that question, how they intend to use the product. That's. I mean, you don't build a thing without really having that in mind. And little me over here in DevRel, I'm glad that all that thinking has gone on, but I also am fascinated by things that emerge. So if there's product market fit for a new thing, then you kind of get to discover how people use the product in valuable ways. And what's really beautiful is when those are not the things that you intended. Come up with things that are useful and bring value to them, and you're like, oh, son of a gun, I didn't think you'd do that. So I am less concerned with what I intend people to do, and more concerned with, all right, what's the world out there right now?
Yeah.
What's broken? What's hard about your life? And what's this thing do? And how's it work? That it can be the magic elixir that you go on this journey and you come back home with, and you're empowered to solve problems in your world and in yourself that you couldn't have beforehand.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Why'd you point out too? Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
For a thing like Tableflow, which briefly, it's like a way to turn a Kafka topic into an iceberg table. So you check this box, and the schema of the topic becomes the schema of the table, and Iceberg APIs work on that thing without the normal, extract what's in the topic and dump it into Parquet files in a data lake, like all that happens for you sort of in place.
Right.
And so to make that make sense, I have to confess, since it's new, I don't really know what all the questions are that are going to come up. I think I do.
Sure.
I think I have to tell you, okay, here's how iceberg works. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. That's, as of this recording, it's a super hot topic everybody wants to learn about. So
No pun intended.
Sure,
Yeah.
iceberg. And let me remind you that ETL sucks. But just broadly, and here's a way to do things without that. It just kind of pointing out the things that are hard about life, and here's how this thing fits in.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I've often wondered that too. Just sort of that balance of nudging people in a way that they're going to, I guess, adopt something for their use case and their mindset and their flow, versus trying to be too overly prescriptive in terms of like, this is A to Z what you have to do, and if you don't do this, then it's like the wrong way.
It has to. I mean, people. That's one of the nice things, I think, about the way our society is organized, is that people get to make voluntary choices about buying things for the most part, right? You can't force people. That's generally considered a crime, right? And use force to take things from people. So you gotta offer something that's valuable and explain what it does and why it's valuable, and hope that they will make the decision, and they will only make that decision if it brings value to them. So the kind of storytelling that I like to do around that, and I'm not precisely selling, right? It's not like I carry a number,
right,
as a developer relations team, but I am wanting to persuade, which is similar. And so I have to show that I can identify with a problem that my audience has, something about your world that kind of sucks. And maybe you're very, very used to dumping data from your streaming estate and Kafka topics over there, and using Kafka Connect to write Parquet files in your data lake. And that's just what one does. But, step back and look at the downsides of that. And that's how we've been doing data warehousing for 40 years. Is you take the stuff from over there and you put it over here, and there are good reasons to be doing that. But man, there's downside to that. And what you really are going to want is this anyway. And so this being, these days you kind of iceberg tables on top of your massive collection of Parquet files.
Right.
And well, here you go. So that identifying with something that's painful, explaining the thing, and then applying that technology that you've just explained to that pain in their life. That's the 3-act story that everything my team does. I mean, I want it to be some form of that. And I think what's beautiful about that is it is explicitly empathetic. It begins and ends with identifying with the person in the room. And if it's the hero's journey, well, the hero is not me. The hero is them.
Right.
And they will only go on that journey if the elixir actually kills the dragon or whatever. That's up to them to determine. And sometimes we find that the precise account of the problem, like we thought it was a dragon, and this is the thing that kills dragons. They're like, well, actually, I don't have a dragon, but I have, bridge trolls, and it turns out this works on bridge trolls too, or whatever, and they find out a use that you didn't intend, but still valuable for them.
That's interesting. It reminds me of this exercise. You kind of made it sound like a story brand. If you've heard of that.
I have heard of it, but
yeah. I mean, the notion is really just how would you write the story arc of a typical movie or a novel, right? Where there's a character who has a problem, a villain. Somebody helps this character conquer the villain, and that's the story. This is Star Wars. That's
what the story is.
Yep. Yeah. And I do this a lot too. If I'm coming up with a new book or a product or something, I always do the story brand exercise. Like, who is the dragon in your scenario, or the bridge trolls or whatever.
Yeah, you need to know who the villain is.
Yeah, yeah. But all too often, what I find are people just try and go straight to selling the elixir, right? And that's it's good. It's good elixir.
It kills me. They start with, let me tell you how great this elixir is.
Yeah.
All the things this elixir is going to do for you. And like, well, for who? Who's out there? What, do you know anything about them?
Right.
Nobody cares about your elixir, or maybe a few people will, but guess what? There's a lot of other elixirs out there. So
A lot.
it doesn't work.
Well, and this is what I see in the data space and now the AI space. A lot of products are coming along where it's just, again, a sea of sameness. It's our elixir is better than that elixir over there by ours. And it's like, well, I don't know. You don't even know my problem.
Right.
Maybe I'm allergic to the elixir. I don't know.
Right. Rather than, hey, I know who you are. I know what it's like for this thing in your life to hurt.
Mhm.
And I've got something I think can help.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about it. Let's go on this journey together.
Mhm.
That's what we're trying to help people do. And if
With developer relations, like how? So you mentioned that there's a distinction between what you do and maybe what marketing does. And so maybe walk the audience through that distinction and how developer relations is judged maybe as successful or maybe unsuccessful.
Oh, that's a tough one. But the distinction really depends on the business. So let me start with where I am and where I spent, most of the last 10 years, which is data infrastructure. And so data infrastructure is there's a robust distinction between who buys it and who uses it. And who uses it is, again, maybe for parochial reasons, I just use the word developer, technical person. And that person doesn't have budget for data infrastructure. They don't have budget for much, right? They type wealth into a text editor on a keyboard. They don't solve problems by buying things. But you want to sell that to somebody who does have budget, who does solve problems by spending money. So with that big distinction between buyer and user, marketing is responsible for finding people who might be buyers and getting to know who they are and nurturing them along a path where they become more and more aware of the brand and the solution and blah blah blah. However that whole process works, where eventually they can make a decision to buy. Now, I don't do that. That is what marketing does. And selling. Those are go-to-market functions are extremely important. Companies die without them. But again, in this data infrastructure space, it's my job to kind of earn the love and trust and to equip this much larger set of technical people who are building things. Since there's kind of an assumption that there's some kind of free tier, an open source download, free version of the cloud product, like whatever it is, depending on the business. I can go and say to my fellow technical people, let me explain to you how this thing works. And then if it sounds like that solves a problem you need, or you just kind of want to play with it more, here's how you can go play with it. And you're risking time at that point. You don't have money to risk because you don't have money to spend on software. That's just not how it works. So here's a free thing. Go play with that. And maybe you'll build something with it. Maybe it'll be successful. Maybe it'll actually solve a problem you have. And at some point, that company now is going to show up on the radar of these expert marketers who will find buyers. So that's from a business perspective, that's how you do that. And so a successful program is one that is earning the attention of developers in the space of the technology. And the easiest way to do that is count activity. How many people came to the conference talk? How many people RSVP to the meetup? How many people watched the video, read the blog post? And that's not the best. That's not a business outcome, but it's often the best you can do, because unlike marketing, I can't really ask you who you are. You're not going to sign up to clone a repo. There's no such thing.
Right.
Or watch a YouTube video. It doesn't work. And so I can't track you quite as much. But that's kind of the first order way of knowing that you're succeeding. Second, maybe third order, we're working on some stuff where we're able to gather kind of like activity statistics based on organization, not person. Because again, that's if we happen to know like who you are, having come to a meetup or something like that, or joined our Slack workspace, there's like a sacred trust that we're not going to turn that over to make you elite.
Right.
That's fatal, and we keep a very hard line there. But do we know things about your company? Are there like 15 developers at your company who have started asking questions and going to meetups and think, well, that's an interesting signal. And so kind of being able to know post hoc where are those peaks of activity in organizations relative to companies that spend money, become customers, or that's looking at those outcomes in a post hoc analytical sense is the thing we're working on.
Interesting. What do you think about the role of influencers in the data space
Generally
these days?
terrible people, just can't stand them.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, really. No, they're, I think, very important. Influencers are, in our space, like you, are just people who are very good at doing this and have acquired or, learned new innately the skills required to build an audience and a platform. And so it's tough because typically influencers like you, I would call it for you.
I'm reluctantly one. Yeah, I didn't choose this life, but it chose me, I guess.
It chose you. You did not choose the thug life. Yeah. Your brand is you, and that brand, there's an implied contract that comes with that. If somebody in your community is going to give you their attention and listen to what you say and confer authority on your opinions, all of which is inherent in being an influencer, you have to treat that trust well. In other words, you can't be a shill.
Right.
You have to be a truth teller. And, there's all room to disagree on things. Let me ask you about data modeling and see where we get, right? Everybody's got different opinions, but you can't merely shill.
Right.
And so from my perspective, partnering with influencers, like we do that. That's 100% a thing that I like and I'm willing to do, but it's only ever a little part of the program because you can't just be my guy. You have to be your guy, or your audience shouldn't trust you as you.
Well, it goes away.
It goes away, right? It goes away.
Yeah.
And to a similar degree, I have to be careful. I can't say BS. I mean, everybody knows I work for Confluent. Confluent story. This is all going to be in a very Confluent-y direction, but it has to be useful. And that's what makes DevRel DevRel. I mean, nobody wants to lie. Okay, there are very few people who will just straight up tell lies.
I mean, Firefest 2 is supposedly coming out, so there's that.
Wait. I saw that. Just madness. But I have to say things that are defensible and useful.
Yeah.
In an educational sense. Everybody expects me to represent Confluent, but I can't just spout whatever. You have to add kind of an angle of independence there. So can I engage with an influencer like you? 100%. Love it. But it's got to be limited because you can't, as I see your work, you got to maintain a lot of vendor independence.
Well, yeah, and I couldn't be out there like wearing like a Kafka mascot costume or something. That would be really weird. Yeah. It wouldn't be on brand. It has to be a hoodie at least. I'm just kidding. Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting game, and I feel like that's one of the dynamics that probably wasn't a thing back when you were getting into DevRel in the early 20, just because influencers weren't a thing. Now with social media, it's I would say it's sort of blowing up around COVID time where I started noticing data influencers. I didn't even think that was a thing. And then, you know, but I have lots of friends who are lumped into that category. I'm lumped into it, even though I'm a kind of a curmudgeonly old man at this point. Like, but you know, it is what it is, right? You know, as you put it, if you develop um, I guess, a role of influence in the industry, then that says, I guess by definition, you are influential. So, but you got to be careful with it. Like I don't take it for granted. Like I definitely don't go and cheese out on stuff. It's like,
no, you can't.
that's dumb. That's interesting. And what do you think the role of um, developer relations is going over the next few years?
Um, I think the last 2 years have brought a lot of sobriety, and I hope that that continues. So the ZERP period caused well, a lot of overinvestment in a lot of things. That's what happens when interest rates get too low, is people make investments that are not productive, and then party's over and we all have a hangover. So there was a boom, and now I think there's a bust. And man, I don't think the boom was good, because it was a time when I would hear developer relations leaders or folks who you know wanted to be leaders saying things like, "Well, I don't worry about impact on the business. That's you know filthy lucre. Hands off. I just want to help people solve problems and be better." Okay, that's nice. That reminds me of 17-year-olds picking a college and a major because it just matches their lifestyle and vibe, and you know they want to go spend $250,000 on this 4-year experience of something that just sounds fun to them. You know, there are people who have resources to be able to do that. Fine, you can consume that. But you know, I'm not. I'm not about that life. So as we're getting away from that kind of period of zero interest rate drunkenness, there is, I think, less investment in DevRel. It's not a great time if you're a developer advocate to find a new role. And there is more attention to what is the impact. And because it's a fledgling discipline, and because of complexities like in the typical case, like infrastructure, where there's a buyer-user distinction, you can't just collect emails and track the progression through the pipeline of the person. It's harder to measure. You know, it's taking us some time to figure out the best ways to do that. But I think with this period of sobriety, I hope we don't go back to any kind of you know bacchanalia anytime soon, where there's foolish overinvestment. And I would like to see us get better at inferring business outcome and really figuring out what should the data pipelines look like, what do the analytics look like. You know, let's get some stuff published about how to do that.
Yeah,
I would love in the next last 5 to 10 years of my career if I could make some contributions to that and find out.
that's cool. How did Kafka become? Kafka is now seen as the standard, I suppose.
I call it the universal data substrate.
Yeah. How did that happen?
I think perfect storm or confluence.
No pun intended. Yeah.
Of several waves reinforcing each other. You had in the late 2000s, the application architectures that emerged in the late 80s, we'll just call that client server. The internet happened, and software looked entirely different. Everything's delivered through a browser. It's all, you know, completely upended. You could have fooled application architectures, right? That paradigm, the names changed, but it completely survived the internet untouched until smartphones really started to penetrate. So you have the late 2010s. We're starting to say monolith as a bad word. It's now a bad thing we're doing, where there is a single database and one application that babysits it. And one of the things that was happening was microservices, right? We see, let's break, and again, very software development lens over here, but let's break a perfectly useful application up into a bunch of little ones and have them talking. And the ways everybody did that for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years were so bad, I'm amazed the paradigm survived. It was just, there was a lot of failure. And I think Kafka was open sourced before the word microservices was even coined, a year before the word was coined. So Kafka was happening as a data pipelines tool. And I'll get back to that in a minute, because that's one of the other ways. But people are trying and failing with microservices, and then Kafka's kind of got some maturity and some adoption. We're like, oh wait, distributed logs, that might be a much better way of making these things work. So you have this emerging application paradigm, which is a bunch of little programs talking to each other. What they needed was a distributed log to exchange events. I think that's the conclusion that we've reached. Mm-hmm. So on the application side of things, we didn't build it for that. We didn't even know to ask the question, but it happened, and that drove some adoption. On the data side of things, that same smartphone, explosion of data in the late 2000s began to break the traditional data warehouse as it was being practiced then. So you had Hadoop, you had the data lake, and you had all the stuff that happened there. And this is the actual origin story of Kafka, is people finding that keeping that fed with batch processes was brittle and slow, and they wanted a thing that could do it, one event at a time. And so you had an application motion, you had a data pipeline. I think for anybody who's really saying data engineering, data pipeline motion that created a need for this thing, and those two reinforced each other at the same time as the cloud is piece by piece taking over deployment, and that's reinforcing the microservices thing. That's making that seem to make more sense, and so you have these mutually reinforcing waves. That's how I see it. And Kafka is at the center of this second major revolution. If client server 40 years ago was the first disruption of what had then been the mainframe paradigm, this is the final disruption of client server and the associated data architectures. Mm-hmm. So I think this is we have another generation of this to unpack.
Yeah, it seems to have won. I mean, I don't think it's disputable at this point.
No, it's there. Now, what needs to be on top of it is now the question.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun and interesting, because that's this just big terra incognita on top of Kafka, and we're like, okay, we need to explore this map and see what's out there. Make some mistakes and build some stuff we don't need, and pick the wrong horse and pick some of the right horses.
Right. That's awesome. Switching gears. Yeah. And we're talking about Instagram at the beginning. Yeah. So on your feeds, you're always either cooking or hacking on hardware.
Yeah.
Talk about hacking on hardware. I think that's just because I don't see a lot of my friends post food pics. You're the only one I see who's constantly hacking on hardware. What are you doing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it goes back to boyhood, Tim. Before I had my first computer, I had electronics as a hobby as a little kid. Wasn't very good at it. Like, I'd get magazines that build this circuit. Most of them didn't work, but it was fun. And my degree was kind of like a mixture of computer science and electrical engineering. I've got a hardware background. And I spent the first 10 years of my career writing firmware for like mostly little embedded devices. That's kind of
interesting.
My background, yeah. And at work these days, I don't write a lot of code. I'm more likely to write a Google Slides deck and talk to people in Slack, and occasionally write a new presentation, but I don't write a lot of code for work. So how do I scratch that itch? Well, all right, I should tell you a story. I brought anybody watching the video version of this. So if you're just listening to the audio version, I'll describe what I'm doing, but if you're watching the video version, bring some props here. Okay, this little vacuum tubey guy is called the Nixie tube. Kind of holding it up to the light there. You see some digits in there.
Yeah.
Now, when I was a little boy, my grandpa, I love my grandpa, he had a calculator in his study that the display was these little vacuum tube things. So I was just captivated by them. It's a 50s, 60s era technology, display technology. There's little metal digits in there that glow. You know, you put a high voltage source on one side and you ground the digit that you want to glow, and current flows through that and glows. It's cool. And a few years ago, for my birthday, I got myself a kit that was a clock with these little Nixie tubes. Or these tubes that came from Ukraine. Just right off the war had started, this guy was still shipping tubes out. It was amazing.
That's cool.
And that clock design didn't work very well. It didn't display correctly, and I, kind of looked at the schematic like, I see what's going on here. That sucks. Didn't work, and I had this idea. Long answer to this question. Just work with me here. I could do that, but with LEDs, right? You could imagine another little prop. You could get a little grid of LEDs, and these, if you're watching the video, these are not all populated, but say 10 rows, and stick a little piece of light up, acrylic polycarbonate on top of that, and make a Nixie clock with LEDs. Okay, that sounds fun. And you get into that. I started digging into it, and the RGB LEDs, you get these single little chip that's got a RG and a B. Kind of the default device, the signaling is super fussy, and trying to signal them on a regular microcontroller is going to be tough. And I started looking into FPGAs, which I'd never done before. I used an FPGA for that. Played it a little bit. Anyway, ended up finding an LED that was much easier to signal. And I found the Raspberry Pi Pico. So just about a year ago, they released an update to that processor, the RP2350, which is a little 32-bit microcontroller with an ARM core and all of the little goodies and peripherals that you expect on a system-on-a-chip microcontroller. And what's fun about that for me is this is the software of my youth in my 20s. This is, it's a cooler part than we had back then, but what you did. So, I just started kind of playing around and got some of these little Raspberry Pi Pico boards, and man, I had to wrestle the tool chain to the ground. It's pretty much all C, C++. At least that's the choice I made. There's some Python-y, this thing called MicroPython, but I'm not about it. It's all C and C++. There's a new build tool you got to learn that was horrible called CMake. That probably took 6 months of my life away. There's a new little embedded operating system that's actually kind of the default free one. It's made by AWS, so IoT things. It's called FreeRTOS. It's just a very minimal operating system. It's got threads and little interprocess signaling things. A TCP/IP stack, because you don't want to write all that. You want to be able to connect to Wi-Fi and everything. That's all in there. So it's all done, right? The stuff's all out there, but actually getting a build working and doing this in kind of after hours hobby time, that's pretty limited. It's a lot of work. It takes forever, but it's fun because it's hey, this is the stuff I used to do.
Yeah.
And the hardware design isn't super sophisticated, but I used to do stuff like that. That was cool. And so I ended up here. Again, this only works if you're watching the video. Plug this. Yeah. I had to.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, check it out. It's joining the network right now. It doesn't know what time it is yet. There it is. Okay, so on this camera, it's a little tough to see, but there's a 1 and there's a 3 because only the 3 row is lit up in these LEDs. You see it blinking. That's some software simulated flickering.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, but
It kind of mimic the vacuum tube flickering.
Yeah. Each one of these is its own circuit board. I had to design and 3D print some brackets, and I had to
That's
have
super
my
cool.
friend who has a Glowforge help me cut these with a laser. And anyway, it's this clock. I love clocks. I love light.
Was each one of those bottom panels that each a Pico?
No, there's
No.
one Pico. So
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And each one of these is just 5 times 50 of those chip LEDs.
That's cool.
APA 102 listeners, if you're into this kind of thing, that are easier to signal to. But yeah, I had to buy a whole reel of 1,000 of them. That was the cheapest way to get all these LEDs, and kind of figure out how to do surface mount fabrication, which I hadn't done before. I took a bunch of video sometime over the next couple months. I'll get that edited into a build video.
That's super cool.
It's kind of fun. And there's more to come. If you look at the video behind, or the background behind me, the blue and the orange background, that's off the shelf light strips. Well, obviously, dear listener, we're not gonna be content with off the shelf light strips. So I got more stuff.
Were you making light strips too?
Yeah.
Sick.
Because I'd like to be able to like animate slow changes, subtle, non-distracting patterns, and just have more control over what's going on with the light.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a hobby.
Everyone needs a hobby. I know my kids love light strips. The room is just light strip central. They put cotton on the wall so it looks like a cloud. It's super cool.
So my wife and I just bought, we're under contract for 5 acres in Elizabeth, Colorado. We're going to build a house there.
Oh, wow.
And light strips, in a respectable new build home and everything, there's really a place for that, because you can get, instead of harsh overhead can lighting, you can get like nice, soft, even lighting in a room. There's a lot to be said for it.
Oh yeah, and it's LED. They don't take up any power. So
right. Although, funny story, if you light up all, let's see, 300 LEDs on this board, it's like 70 watts. And there is a trace on the board that quickly becomes too hot to touch. So I am rebuilding the lower carrier board for safety reasons, because if the software can put the hardware in a state in which it might catch on fire, what we don't say is it's okay, we just won't do that. We redesign the hardware so it's safe.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like I said, you always post some pictures of something, and I'm like, I don't know what he's building. It looks cool.
It looks cool. It's really a very expensive, elaborate clock, and I love clocks. I love light, and what's been fun about this is just how cross-disciplinary it is for me. Like, there's a little bit of hardware. There's some 3D printing and custom design part. Bunch of old firmware skills. So it's just like kind of pulling together a bunch of things. I got some ideas where I'll get some Kafka and some good data logging in future versions of the project. Related projects. We need to bring that part of my life in here too.
Yeah, are you gonna put Kafka in your home?
Oh, of course, obviously the home lab. The 8 gig Raspberry Pi 5. Who wouldn't?
I actually have a couple of those. Those are nice.
That's a single node, but that can comfortably run Kafka.
Oh, it can. I mean, I run a few things, and I keep finding these old. I used to collect Raspberry Pis and Arduinos. I have so many of these laying around. I found this one that's like 10 years old. It's like a Raspberry Pi 3, I think.
Yeah,
but still works. Still has utility. I think it has to have a Wi-Fi card. See, this is so old. It has the Wi-Fi antenna, but
yeah,
it works. Just when there's a lot of automations you can do with these things.
Absolutely. So, I've got an old 3 or 2 plus or whatever it was from that era that I've got that plus an oscilloscope plus custom made audio files will go maybe like right here in the background and make little wiggly lines. That's ADHD. We need things that blink and move.
We're nerds, and I got like synthesizers everywhere here. It's like this one.
Nice.
Just I always take stuff like this on the road. And actually, after podcasts, I've known to DJ and just dork around because I'm just stare at the screen for a while. So it's nice to just do something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably post that on Instagram at some point, and then it'd be fun. Well, Tim, it's good to see you. Guess next time I see you, we'll be in jolly England. So
yes, can't wait. It's gonna be great.
Be fun. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one.